Hello, this is David Hendrick, and today we're going to be talking about robotics and coding in the classroom. It may seem like I have two topics for my research assignment, but the two are actually linked together not only in the way that they function, but also for a more profound understanding of our current educational system. But I'll save that for the very end of this presentation. To begin, I want to talk about LaHure, who released an article in 2018 with predictions of the top 10 technological trends in the classroom. Both robotics and coding independently made up that list. So 1/5 of that entire list was either coding or robotics. LaHure said that robotics will continue to trend due to the wide range of price points available. When we think of a robotics program, we might think it's very expensive, but the truth is, while there are very expensive programs a school could try to implement, there's also very cost-effective ways as well. Additionally, it has an in-depth learning experience for the children. Coding will continue to trend, LaHure says, because of the push to help students be prepared for the job market waiting for them. So let's start with robotics. And to start with robotics, we need to first of all ask ourselves, what is a robot? Because you might be surprised by its definition. Lurch says that a robot is a programmable machine or gadget that can replicate human actions by executing input commands. They can range in skill and complexity, which means that our normal preconceived notion of a robot, something like a C-3PO, a humanoid machine, isn't necessarily true. They might be performing only very simple or specific tasks. An example of this is this barber robot that I found, which is purely designed to cut hair and nothing else. Now, why would we want to implement a robotics program in a K-12 setting? Well, according to Lurch again in 2018, robotics programs incorporate a range of skills in a learning environment that promotes a diversity in skills, talents, and backgrounds. We talk a lot here at APU about the benefit of heterogeneous groups, how students can learn from one another from their diverse backgrounds and cultures, perspectives. We've also talked a lot about problem-based learning and the inquiry process. Well, robotics programs combine those two thoughts. The students work together to try to solve a common problem. They need to build and program to make a robot work. The robot needs to complete a function. And they do this together, and their unique backgrounds and thoughts help benefit the group overall. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of different types of robotics programs. Some are very expensive. Some are very inexpensive. An example of which would be one right here on our own backyard, Engineering for Kids. This is used in a lot of school districts we might recognize, such as Alta Loma, Etowanda, Fontana, very big in the Inland Empire. Now, their robot, unlike this one on the previous slide, which you can see maybe looks a little bit more advanced, the robots being built in Engineering for Kids are actually made out of Legos. So this is another example of how robotics programs can easily fit into a school and inexpensive price point. Lynch, not to be confused with Lurch, who we just spoke about, but Lynch in 2018 gave 5 more reasons to teach robotics. Lynch says that it's a great introduction to programming, which we'll get into soon when we talk about coding. It also increases creativity in the students. It teaches our children how to turn frustration into innovation. It promotes inclusivity. And it also prepares the students for the future. This last point is particularly interesting because it means 2 things. First of all, it obviously means getting the students ready for the job market waiting for them, since robotics is obviously going to continue. But it also means preparing students for the future of robotics and the future of artificial intelligence. Tegmark in 2015, along with many other technological theorists, talked about a thing called superintelligence. To understand superintelligence, we first of all need to recap what AI is. AI stands for artificial intelligence, and it's used in robots and computer programs to allow them to perform tasks that would ordinarily require human intelligence. Now, superintelligence is a theory that AI will one day vastly surpass the limitations of human intelligence in every way. And that's the key point. It will surpass human intelligence in every way. There's, of course, computers that can calculate mathematical problems much faster and much larger than any human could do now. But the idea of superintelligence is that a machine or artificial intelligence will surpass the limitations of the human mind in every way. When you think of that, your mind might automatically go to images like this, killer robots from movies. But the truth is, Tegmark continues that there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around AI and the potential of superintelligence. The first is that many people think this idea of superintelligence is not possible, or if it is, it won't happen for many, many generations to come. Tegmark and many others like him believe that not only is superintelligence possible, but it will likely happen within our lifetime. And when you hear that, the next myth that Tegmark goes into is that the best thing we should do is to panic that this is a possibility. Again, let me go back to this slide with the killer robots. Tegmark believes that's not true, that this is another myth that we should panic or that we should stop trying to make advancements in artificial intelligence. The truth is the best thing we can do is prepare for the future and educate young people now so that they're going into a field and they know how to work with artificial intelligence, and we're prepared for the possibility of a superintelligence in the future. Now, you may have noticed a common thread in this presentation that that all of Lahura, Lynch, Lurch, and Tegmark all have mentioned that an introduction of coding is a very important aspect of robotics and why it's important in a K-12 setting. And that's, of course, very true. A robot needs a code, needs those input commands in order for it to be a robot by its very definition. And this is great because introducing coding to students is a great way to help them be career ready when they graduate. And this will transition us to the coding portion of this presentation and how it connects to robotics. Unlike robotics, which is very regionalized, again, there's that engineering for kids program in the Inland Empire. In the coding aspect of education, there's really one name to know, and that's code.org. Code.org is the leader in K-12 coding. It was originally founded in 2013 and became very popular just a few years later. In fact, at the end of 2019, 40% of students in K-12 had a Code.org account, 70 million projects were created on Code.org, and 99% of surveyed teachers who use Code.org in their classroom would recommend it to other teachers. Code.org also touts that they promote equity in their classroom, and they also say that the big philosophy is to push computer science into the mainstream. This seems to be true because 20 million students that use Code.org are female, and 48% of the students using Code.org are minorities. And Code.org also says that they have helped influence policy changes to support computer science in 49 U.S. states. We'll get more into that later because that's how all this how robotics connects at the very end. Now, what do other people say about Code.org? Because this is what Code.org says about themselves. Well, Brown in 2018 performed an independent research study about Code.org, and his research indicated that Code.org does indeed yield substantial benefit to both computer science AP tests and an interest in computer science among women and minorities who normally do not go into that field. Others also support Code.org. Tech giants such as Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg not only have endorsed Code.org, but they've actually partnered with them to create training videos. So when you sign up for Code.org and you're first learning how to use it, you'll be trained by videos featuring Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and many others. So here we have an image of what Code.org actually looks like when you're trying to complete a mission. So you can see that there are 3 columns here. The column on the left has the image, the column in the center has the blocks, with the gray background, and the white column on the right says workspace. You take the columns in the center section under blocks, and you create a code in your workspace. So you can see this says in the workspace, when run, it will first move left, and then if you put down a move up under the move left, it will then move left and then move up. So you create this code for the thing to do these actions. Going back to the image on the left-hand side, if you look closely, you might actually recognize what this thing is. And at the bottom, it tells you what you're supposed to do. It says, we need to collect that scrap metal. BB-8, can you get it? Yeah, for anyone who's seen the recent movies, this is actually Star Wars, the characters being used. And that's a whole other great aspect of Code.org, is they have partnered with Disney and Fox and Nintendo and other video games like Angry Birds to bring in very notable, very light characters to use in Code.org, which makes Code.org very engaging for students as they learn how to do basic coding. So what does coding actually do for students in a K-12 setting? When I first was researching this, I would have thought the answer would have been it increases the students' rigor or their mathematical capabilities to bring up their math scores. And the same would have been true for my understanding of robotics. The truth is actually something else entirely, and something that really surprised me. And this is where the two ideas, coding and robotics, combine, as I mentioned at the beginning, for a more profound understanding of what this can do in a K-12 setting today. Code.org's philosophy is that computer science is fundamental for students in 21st century learning. Fundamental. That means that Code.org believes that computer science shouldn't necessarily be supporting mathematics. It is on the same level as mathematics. It should be its own subject taught in schools. However, it's not being taught in schools, at least not to the extent that it should be, according to Code.org. And I would agree with Code.org's philosophy here, because if you take a look at the jobs happening today, let alone the future, in California alone, there are a little under 6,000 computer science graduates, but there's almost 70,000 job openings in this field. This is going to be the leading industry in the future. And yet we don't teach this in our education system to the degree that we probably should. And that goes back to the larger philosophical understanding from this presentation I mentioned at the very beginning, how robotics and coding connects underneath a larger umbrella. Because I believe code.org is correct. Computer science should be included in our K-12 setting as a fundamental subject, not used to support other subjects, but it should be a subject on its own, taught on the same level as mathematics and English language arts and science and history. Because we need to go back and ask ourselves the question, what is the point of education? Why do we teach math? It's to teach our students' minds how to think logically and use critical thinking. English language arts, we teach that because reading is the gateway to all other forms of knowledge. We teach history to see where we've come from. We teach science so we know how the world around us works. Computer science, the truth is, most students or many students are going to be working in this field. Why are we waiting until higher education to begin teaching this to them? When in truth, that's a completely inequitable way to be approaching computer science. Every student should have the opportunity to learn about these fields because it's going to influence their lives. So I believe my biggest takeaway from this research assignment, learning more about coding and robotics in a K-12 setting, is that these two things combine with many other facets of computer science to really form a new primary subject that should be taught in a K-12 setting. If we don't do this, we're not doing our job as educators to prepare the children for the future.